delighted to be here with Harmeen Mehta, who has been the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer for BT for about 2 years.
Yeah.
When did you start? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. So BT Digital was actually created 1st of April, 2021.
Fooling me.
I was actually under the impression it's an April Fool joke. I'm coming halfway across the world and I might be told, ha ha, when you land here. But no, it was real.
So it's built around you.
Yes and no. I mean, I think it should be built around BT, and as BT prepares to move into the next century and also coping with all the headwinds. I mean, it's our customers are turning digital so fast, and COVID kind of accelerated that. But much more than that, it is everything we do around us. It is our interaction with tech are increasing so much, and our journeys on, with different digital propositions is increasing so much. Any company that doesn't meet that kind of what's now becoming a kind of a basic standard is going to stand out a lot more, but for the wrong reasons. And I think being a nationalistic organization and, coming from a little from behind in this world, we just needed to find a way of accelerating that and doing that on steroids. And that's why BT Digital was created. And I am delighted to be leading it as well.
Brilliant. I want to just briefly talk about you, though, before we talk about BT.
Sure.
So you said
Not my favorite topic, but sure.
Coming over here, I could tell. Coming over here means that you've had a 24-year career already, 25, 26-year career. You've lived in 11 countries.
Yes.
And you've worked in more than 30 countries.
Yes.
You've worked for Barton Airtel. You've worked for an Argentinian bank called BBVA. You've worked for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. You've worked at HSBC. I mean, you've worked all over the world. Tell us a bit about your career. This enormous career.
I think
How did you get started?
I'm still in search for the light, but it started. I was very young. I always wanted to be a computer engineer.
You grew up in India.
I grew up in India. I started coding when I was 11. So I knew that somewhere in computers lies my future. I fell in love with computers and the possibility they could bring for the world.
And how did that happen? Because if you talk to a Brit, they'll say, we had the BBC Acorn at home and I started coding. I mean, was there a kind of equivalent in India?
It was exactly that, actually. I grew up it was a Roman Catholic school, a convent, and I spent my first impressionable 10 years of schooling with them. But it was very progressive as well. And one of the things, it was one of the elite schools where I grew up. And they just decided one fine day that they were going to build this computer lab. And I'm a cricket buff. And, I think one of the injections they give to you as a baby, one of them is polio. There are a couple of others, and one of them I got was cricket. And the World Cup was going on, and I was searching around, as a young kid for somewhere where I can find the score. And I stumbled upon this room that what I thought at that time had these funny looking TVs with something attached to them. And there was nobody in the room, and I started playing with the knobs, and the cricket match came up, and I just started watching it, and in came one of the nuns and said, "Oh my God, this is a computer, not a TV, girl." And then I asked her, "What's a computer?" And she showed me, and I was about 10 or 11 at that time. And I just got so fascinated by this computer that was in front of me. That could be a TV, it could be a computer. And she taught me a very simple language, which was prevalent at that time, called BASIC.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so every lunch, it was meant for the senior girls in the school, but every lunch break, I would take my little box of lunch and go into that room, and she grew very fond of me, and I grew very fond of her, and that's how I started coding.
We've been through every iteration, but coding nuns is a new one. Coding nuns is a new one on me.
Yeah, I mean, she was the nun responsible for the room, but there was a proper computer teacher as well, and she would insist that all three of us have lunch together. And
it's fantastic.
But it changed the course of my life.
Studied at university?
Yes. So then I went to computer science, and I took it up as a discipline, and I specialized in AI. But I was a child of AI winter, because as I graduated, the world was saying, well, AI is consuming a lot of money and not yielding anything.
Yeah.
And that's how I joined British Airways, because it was one of the very few companies in the world who were still wanting to experiment with at least intelligent algorithms, etc. So I actually worked for BA, helping develop their entire revenue management system on how every seat could be priced differently using a lot of intelligence based on 10 years of flying patterns around the world and predicting the configuration of an aircraft,
How
the
amazing.
price of a seat. Oh, I I just loved it. It really got my brain thinking.
Bigger and bigger jobs until you've landed here in the UK, and I'm deciding which direction to go in, because I'd love to hear your reflections on different countries, but I think I'm going to come to that later when we talk about when you're
Sure.
Prime Minister and what you're going to do, because then I want to know what different policies you're going to take from different countries. But let's just talk about the huge challenge you've got at BT. You started talking about it at the beginning about the customer and so on. And you're the Chief Digital and Innovation Officer, and it's a huge portfolio. It's product and platform management, it's design, it's engineering, it's innovation, it's data, and it's transformation. I worked with BT when I was a government minister, and I think there is a lot in common between the government and BT. And one of the things I like to say, having never worked in business, as a kind of trite dinner party phrase, is that company culture is incredibly hard to change. And this was a nationalised business.
Yeah,
and 40 years later, it still feels, I'm being rather cheeky here, it feels like a very bureaucratic company.
Yeah.
And another cheeky thing I like to say is that when they took over EE, it should have been the other way around.
Correct.
It would have been the quickest way to change BT. So how are you tackling, I mean, there's a lot of the building we're in the east of London feels like a tech startup. How are you tackling this kind of change of culture?
When I came in, a large part of the onus was on exactly that. How do you take a monolithic organization and how do you bring about that difference in thinking as well? But the beauty of my job is when your core job is fundamentally about changing the company. You can do everything except moan that you've landed in a company that feels very bureaucratic. So that's one right I don't have. Because if I moan, I have to moan at myself, because the job is to bring about that change. I'll be very honest. I think companies like BT, there are a few people at the very senior levels, and Philip and the board, who absolutely thought that such a change was absolutely essential for them, because this was a very big change for BT. So obviously there are people like that in the organization that think that change is very necessary. But when you create a change for the rest of the organization to follow suit, it doesn't happen overnight. Bringing about that level of change, it's a change in thinking, it's a change in culture, it's a change of technology, it's a change of ways of working, most importantly. And the biggest change is in the thinking that what got us here is not going to get us to the next level. So as a nationalistic company, you've got a lot of things that you can bank on, because the government will kind of take you together with them on the flow, and you are critical in the infrastructure. Well, we used to be that. We are not now that. And we are competing with not only telcos, we are competing with many other companies, the hyperscalers, other companies which are coming into the space of providing the end product. It's not about providing telecommunications, but telecommunications is a means for the customers to do something.
Yes.
If there are alternative ways for them to do those transformations or achieve that outcome for their business, we're competing with all of those as well. And those are product-led companies. Those are companies that were born in the millennium. Those are companies that don't have the level of bureaucracy. Those are companies that have an entrepreneurial thinking. Those are companies that latch on to an idea and say, how can I garner and put my money behind that idea, because I think it's the thing that will change the world. Otherwise, AI would not be what AI is doing today. And at the same time, a lot of companies that are solving the problem, for me, tech is a means to solve that problem. Digital is a means to solve that problem. What I really need to get to is our organization being able to connect with customers in whatever shape or form or channel that they want to, whether it's online, offline, it doesn't matter. Seamlessly flow between those for them to be able to do everything they need to do at the end of the day and make it easier for them. So they're worrying less about their broadband connection and more about their own business. And it is for us to worry about everything else. And at the same time, how do we bring the best of whatever exists in the world? We have, I tell you, one of the most enviable opportunities in front of us, because we as an organization, we are prime center in almost every single household in the UK. I can hardly think of any more companies in the country that can, vouch for that. And given that, we have an incredible opportunity where we can also help many other companies take their products and solutions and bring them into the homes, because we are already there. And that's a privilege that we have, that we need to really think about very carefully, that how do we use that to actually bring about different solutions, whether it's around connecting your homes or connecting your fridge to your Wi-Fi or your TV to your Wi-Fi, and it's about streaming content, or those are again all means. What the household wants is an ability to run the household most effectively, most efficiently, and for them to carry on with their lives and not think about connectivity and everything else.
So again, we could go in kind of two different directions here, but one of the first big tasks you have is actually making BT a kind of leaner organization.
Yes.
I don't mean that by cutting swathes
Yeah.
of jobs, but I picked up on the fact in your presentation, for example, that you're trying to take it down from, I think BT has 2,500 apps or something down to fewer than 500.
Yeah.
And I remember again the parallel with the government digital service, which I was a sort of keen supporter of. The government did away with 2,000 websites when we first came into power in 2010. I mean, that kind of transformation where there are so many barnacles on the boat, as it were, that you have to scrape off.
Correct.
Exactly what you're saying, and remind the organization, what does the user need? What does the customer want? How are you going about doing that transformation?
I think one of my favorite...
I think you said, sorry to interrupt, because it's all go back. You said it's kind of 30 clicks to order broadband.
Correct. Yeah, it actually is. And it used to be. And I think it's actually by making all of those journeys very, very simple. But it's by framing a different culture whereby we don't come at something with a culture of saying, this is me, my kingdom, this is what I need to do, and hence I will find the solution for it. It's more about the thinking of saying it's a rule of one. And coming from a person who actually believes in no rules, even having one rule, which is called the rule of one, was a big step for me. But I feel that's probably the only rule that I want to have. Everything else is all about finding ways of solving problems. But the only rule we need is a rule of one, which means that there will be one kind of thing that we will develop in this company to do one thing. And everybody will put their weight behind it. So the ultimate success is being able to take a product and get it to market as quickly as possible and as simply as possible and as easily as possible for the customer. The joy doesn't come from having 5 different ways of doing the same thing, and the joy doesn't come from actually making the life of the customer more complex by going and telling them, here, we've got 20 products, you go and choose which one you want. And each one of them, by the way, has about 50 different price variations on it. The idea is for us to develop all of that and go and give the customer the best possible choice and say, based on what we understand for you, these are the best possible things we can offer you. So that's the thinking we are bringing in. We are being quite ruthless. I've inherited about 90% of our tech is legacy. And if we don't bring about a very radical and innovative way of solving that problem, we're going to be here forever. And I'm not going to help the company grow.
Back office changes, working with cloud companies.
It's everything. We are moving 100% to the cloud. There are no holy cows, so we're not going by, what system was developed by whom or whatever. It's really about saying what is the bare minimum that we need. It's lesser number of systems, but the most flexible systems. But more importantly, we are putting a lot of effort on working with the business to simplify the product portfolio, to simplify our ways of working as well, and to simplify the ultimate tech that's needed to do that. And my favorite of all is simplify the journeys for the customers, because at the end of the day, if you are customer obsessed and you really worry about the customer first, everything else falls in line.
So the other thing I was thinking when you were talking earlier about what you're doing is, what does BT stand for? So for me as a minister, it's very easy. BT were the guys I worked with, and I loved working with, by the way, or OpenReach in terms of rolling out broadband. And I was a great defender of the company because it's a tough job. I've seen broadband being delivered in my village. You do not just flick a switch. But once that that job is never done. It's like painting the fourth bridge. But what else is BT for? Because you were talking about connected fridges. I mean, I've got a kind of pet obsession. Why don't we have the Carphone warehouse for mobile? I should be able to wander into a store, and if I want to connect my home, I'm a sort of geeky guy, but I'm not very good at it. If I want to be able to talk to my stereo or order my milk by talking to my fridge, I want someone just to tell me how to do it. Is that the direction of travel? What is the direction of travel for BT?
I think the first direction of travel is to make even buying connectivity, broadband, mobile, all of that very simple and easy, but also build a very reliable service at the back of it and a great customer experience. And as we do that, use the power of what we've done to deliver that, whether it's digitally or through the call centers or through our retail stores, to also bring in a few other things that are needed. We've just launched, home security. and it's an offering that's really going very well. But if
See,
you
as a
think
customer,
about it,
I would grab that with both hands, but
Yeah.
I don't know about it, but I would grab it because, if somebody can deliver me an alarm and a couple of CCTV cameras.
exactly. And if you think about it practically, and this is part of the digital and product thinking that we want to bring in, because it is, at the end of the day, if you think customer first, the process of installing broadband in your home, FTTP and taking fiber, building that in cities and under roads and bridges and all of that is one job. But once it's there and it's outside your house, even connecting your house into it is a different kind of a job. But that job and connecting security is not very, very different.
Exactly.
You come into the house, you look at where you want the right motion sensors or cameras or whatever. You install those, you connect them through to your Wi-Fi and into your router. You do that setting. And the same people who come into your house to do broadband, we just play on that adjacency and we build another business saying, well, they can help connect home security as well. And if you take a step further on the other side, and let's go more deeper into the digital world, well, as your houses become more and more connected and as your kids are online all of the time, delivering security on top of that broadband is an app I see as a paramount and essential thing. And our responsibility, as much as the customers, we want to ensure their safety as well. Not only every household needs to be as security savvy, in order to do that. So how do we deliver that level of security on the broadband itself through the router, but at the same time as a portfolio or a bundle, so you can secure all your phones, all your laptops, and that is what takes us into a cybersecurity world. Now, building on that adjacency, every household has one or two kids that are actually gaming and are big gamers or small gamers, and it doesn't matter. But every parent is worried about that environment. So being able to sell gaming bundles as we work with different companies, translating the same into a business environment, 2 million of the small, medium businesses in this country are our customers. So they buy connectivity from us. But what a small business owner wants to do is run his business. And there are many things he needs to do in order to do that. Connectivity is where you start from. But there are many other solutions. And we've got like a digital marketing hub, which actually helps you, without being digitally savvy, how to promote your business on the internet. And it's a bundle that literally comes at a very low price, and without being a highly digitally savvy customer, we are able to help you promote your business to the right users, to the right customers, so you can get your voice out there and do digital marketing without being PhD in digital marketing.
So you regard your competitors as not just telcos anymore, or the marketplace you're in is not?
No, I regard, we want to be the marketplace for every household, and we want to be the marketplace for every small, medium business as well. And we want our customers to buy from, because we've built a lot of trust, and that's one thing BT's done really well. We're a trusted brand. We might not always be the most loved brand, but we are definitely a trusted brand.
I think that's
and
right.
Increasingly, our NPS scores are increasing on all fronts, which means we're starting to win that love more and more as well. But as we do that, we want to take that trust value and see what are the other adjacencies that we can go into to bring the right value.
And
for
you're
our
looking
customers.
at venture as well. I mean, you're not, I don't know if you're putting money into startups, but you're looking at things like healthcare and even sort of drone delivery and all this kind of thing.
So we are looking at a few adjacencies, which is a very small unit that we have within BT, but which is actually trying to say, what is the BT of the future needs to be like as well. And these are some of those things that if you don't start today, in another 5 or 7 years, when these categories do become big, somebody in BT is going to stand up and say, well, we should have done this in the past because now we are no longer a player there. So we're trying to see that which are the adjacencies that make a lot of sense for us to expand into, because they are a direct extension of what we do today. Drones, for example, we're not into manufacturing drones, and that's not the space we want to be. But we beam today on through the antenna, we beam downwards to provide that network connectivity all around. Well, if we were just able to beam upwards, we would be able to connect a lot of the drones that would be flying in the sky. But more importantly, today there is no skyway or a traffic management or any kind of an air traffic control that actually exists in that level of air that is literally used by the drone deliveries. We want to build the traffic management and the air corridors and the drone corridors for this country, which is actually a direct extension of our core capability of connectivity. and provide that as a means for any company to come, and they provide their drone solutions for their own business, whether it's for delivery of medicines or it's delivery of household products, or more importantly for defense, for any of the stream that it is needed for surveillance. For imagine there's a traffic accident or there is something wrong with one of the railway lines in the middle of nowhere, and going and fixing that, and you get there and you discover I've missed one part.
See it, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you one thing you could do for me is that, in traffic jams, if you had a drone 300 meters ahead just to show what the hell the traffic isn't moving. It's the
exactly.
one thing that drives people bananas. Yeah. But clunky gear change here.
We could start from that and have another one that actually picks you up from the car and drops you where you need to go.
Clunky gear change onto skills. So you need a massive pipeline of digital skills for a big company like BT. Obviously, Digital Futures, we look at entry-level engineers, but you've got the Digital Academy here in BT, which is a sort of skills academy.
Yes, it is.
And there's even talk of it becoming an open academy so that people who don't work at BT can potentially use it. But this is really just an excuse for you to talk about whatever the hell you want to talk about in terms of every country in the world, every developed country in particular, faces a huge digital skills gap. We always in this country, when you read the papers, think, oh, it's just Britain's problem. Every country has this problem. How does one even begin to start to tackle it?
I think because every country has this problem, the onus is also on the large corporates in that country to be part of the solution and not part of creating that problem. Because everybody needs those skills. But if nobody is helping develop those skills, then where are the skills going to come from? I also feel that a lot of the skills academies, and the reason we created our digital academy and our digital campus was because as a category grows in a country, the skills become available, but the category grows. All of us have to contribute into the growth of that category. Otherwise, if it's not big enough and if BT were the only company employing some of these skills, the university students will not want to make that into a career. It's because a lot of the top companies are wanting, and data and AI and digital technologies, because these are what are needed by all of us, is the reason why a lot more people are showing interest in that. But at the same time, as the university graduates come into the workplace, how do you really work with them to nurture some of those skills in a true corporate environment, and taking that from academia but also putting it into implementation is something that corporates can lean much more into. And that's what we are trying to do. We partner up with other companies as well, but we do invest in this space because it's also about us. It's an opportunity for us to take a lot of my own team and my own employees who actually are not as skillful on the new technologies, and how do we retrain them and reskill them as well. So it's a mix of both. But we take this very, very seriously because as an individual, every few years, I have gone back, wherever I've had the opportunity to reskill myself. I went back into and did a course back at MIT on AI again, midway through my career, because I felt AI had changed so much. I went and did that on a lot of my business skills at Howard as well. And every 2-3 years, I feel the itch to do that because I have chosen technology as my field, as in my career and my profession. Well, technology reinvents itself every few years. So I have to invest in myself to keep my knowledge current. Otherwise, I cannot sit here and say I will take BT into the next century if I haven't managed to take myself into the next century.
In some ways, the university model is almost redundant, because how on earth do university graduates necessarily have the skills when they graduate?
Well, exactly. So you've got to, I think learning has to be a constant in your life. Yeah. And the constant is the change. And it has to be business orientated. And it has to be business oriented, which is why corporates have to lean in more. And it has to be a fundamental demand of employees as well, that we continue to invest in them so that they can continue to invest in themselves and keep themselves current.
This is a slightly bigger question, but it sort of stems from the skills question, which is diversity in companies and skills.
Yes.
You are a female leader.
Yeah.
It was probably not as easy for you to rise to the top as it would have been had you been a man. That is changing, but it's a painful thing. It's still a question one has to ask and challenge this the system at the moment. I mean, are you doing more to recruit female engineers from diverse backgrounds at BT to kind of change that picture?
I personally, but I know that...
it's a shortcut to your reflections on being a female leader, which you
but it's also
all the time.
It is true, but it is also... as a professional and a female professional, I do feel there is a little bit more we need to do as companies to promote this a lot more. We take diversity quite seriously. I actually sponsor the gender network within our organization. But what I love is I have a very diverse team, and it's diversity of thought as much as it's diversity of religion and color
Yeah.
and demographic diversity. We've got all of it at our table, and I think that's also what means the same problem. Each one of us reacts to it very differently. And that is what you want, because that's the richness of diversity of thought that you want to bring into companies as well. Men think differently than women do. And you want to have the balance of having both of those different ethnicities, because we grow up in different environments and we grow up with different values and different cultures and different backgrounds and different religious beliefs. That also drives a lot of our thinking. And that's exactly the thinking that our customers bring in.
Do you think it's now kind of being built into companies like BT, or do you think there's still an element of...
I think it's being built into, but there is still a lot more for us to do. And the reason there's a lot more for us to do is because companies are not 100% representative of either the gender mix or the ethnicity mix that society is. That itself shows that there is a lot more to do. The second piece that I really feel is a lot of companies, and larger the companies and the more established the companies, the more they tend to think this is our way of working. They hire diverse candidates, but then they want them to behave in the same way that everybody else behaves. Well, that is where you kill. The moment you kill diversity of thought, you've killed diversity, and all you've got is metrics on a paper.
Yeah.
And that is something that we have to constantly challenge, saying you want people to come in with different thinking so that they can be the change catalyst and change the properties of everything else that they come in touch with, but not change their own properties. And we always expect the reverse. So that's the change in thinking that we've got to bring, both in Britain as well as in this country.
Great. Well, you've segued into my final kind of questions, which are the sort of big questions, because I love talking big policy questions. And the first is, obviously, as a global citizen, if I can call you that, you've been around the world, you've seen everything. And are there countries which sing out to you as being environments where this kind of innovation is so much easier? I mean, we're so used in this country to looking over our shoulder at Silicon Valley. And I always say, well, we've got Silicon Valley in the UK. We've got Cambridge, Oxford, London triangle, if you like. And actually, you've got cities like Manchester. What we don't have is necessarily the massive capital and the kind of risk appetite that you have in the US. But are there other countries that you would say, if you really wanted to drink some Kool-Aid or get some innovative ideas, go and spend, a month here? Or
I think every country and culture has taught me something different. And I've come out of every country a different human being than I went in. And everybody's added on top of that. And we are all some of our experiences. And different cultures change how you interact with them, but also how they think and you see many things in different cultures that you feel they do this very well. This country does food very well, and this country does tech very well, and this country does innovation very well. And I think it's somewhere where someone in those countries, whether it's from a corporate world or from a government world, it doesn't matter, but somebody stood out and decided to take some very different chances and took a few bets that paid off. And that then becomes a kind of it triggers a domino effect in the culture. I would say, I was born and brought up in India, but the moment I graduated, I actually came to the UK and then spent most of my career in all other countries till about 10 years back, when I got an opportunity to go back and work in India for the first time. The 17, 18 years that I was out and before I went back in, it just felt like a very different country. And what had dramatically changed was the outlook of the country on what is the art of problem solving and innovation, and the way it encouraged entrepreneurship and startups, and it became as one of the largest startup countries in the world. That's what brought a lot of other countries bringing in the funding into India, into these startups to allow them to flourish. But it all started with tech became big, and then from tech became the evolution or the implementation of tech, which is the creation of products and platforms, and that's what led to entrepreneurship. The biggest thing that I learned from that was, as a country, you've got to constantly change. You can never be static as a country, and that's what I I do love about India. It has reinvented itself at least 3 times since it got independence.
And what's their secret in terms of digital skills? Because you employ a lot of engineers in India. It has this reputation now producing.
Well, it started because it created the space for itself, because that's what, and it started as a cost arbitrage when the West was looking to do a lot of things and it needed to pivot. And India has always been very strong in academics, and because that's born and brought up in all of us as we're growing up. And hence it always had a lot more orientation towards both medicine as well as engineering from the beginning. But the fact that the world started coming there to utilize those skills in a term that was coined in, 15, 20 years ago, called offshoring, that's what brought a lot of the tech attention. And it also created the model of, follow the sun development, because when the US was asleep, work was happening because India was awake. The same thing happened with the BPO industry. And these two kind of coming together, you had the experience of understanding the problems of the customers, followed with the tech that was being solved. And we did that disparately for a lot of parts of the world. And the startup culture actually emerged by saying, well, if we have these two skills and we brought them together and we created our own products and then took them to the rest of the world, that could be another model, and another model evolved. So it's been a constant evolution, but it's a country that allows for that evolution. I have definitely found that in Israel as well.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
I really feel...
incredible tech startup reputation.
Tech startup, and then at the same time, given that they've always had a different posture in security, etc., they actually took cybersecurity and solutions and products to a very different level. And I love that about working, with a lot of the culture there. It brings a lot of that thinking into almost everything they do. I found that in definitely in the US, which you talked about, which actually is entrepreneurship, but it stems from a very different cultural value. It's more about individualism, and that's what spun into entrepreneurship, because they respected a lot of the individualism. So it came from a different cultural value, but it caused a very different outcome that has now become an industry as well. I would say the same there are small shoots of that I see in some of the Scandinavian countries, where they're really starting to pivot a lot more on that side. I saw a very different flavor of that when I worked in Latin America, where culturally almost 80% of the workforce, which was a very young workforce that worked for me, also studied at the same time. And they brought in a very different thinking, because it's almost that hunger to know more and hunger to do more and hunger to learn about new different things that I saw in Latin America. I want to bottle that and almost bring that back into Britain as well, because we kind of do something and we feel, oh, we've done it. And we keep doing more and more of the same thing.
Okay, so this is brilliant. So this is the final question. Since you're going to start, opining on Britain, I'm Prime Minister for today. I've decided I'm going to be Prime Minister. I've called you. You're in Downing Street. I'm giving you your first cabinet role. And it is based on what you just said to a certain extent. So you're sort of business minister, but also digital skills minister. And I was really intrigued by what you said about your first job at BA again, because I kind of riffed into what you just said, which is, hold on. BA feels a bit like it's kind of falling behind at the moment. The app doesn't quite work as well as you want it to. It's a bit and you've got kind of these airlines like Emirates, and Qatar and so on. And yet there they were 20 years ago, being the first to use AI to price seats individually.
Exactly.
They've lost their tech edge. So what can we do in this country to... and you're doing it at BT, which is why I'm asking you, as it were. You and your colleagues are doing it at BT to keep the big British companies, make them innovative. I mean, I think we're quite good at supermarkets. How do we engender this kind of spirit of transformation and not doing the same thing again and again in British business? And the second question, I'm afraid they're two big questions, which is incredibly annoying of me. This kind of digital skills gap. What would you do? You've got the job. Come on, we've got to power up the digital skills in the UK.
I think for the first part, I would actually say that to bring about that level of change, the one thing that, if there were one thing that Britain could do, is actually just allow for that change. Just literally, even in large organizations in BT, and I see that in the government, we work with a lot of large public sector companies as well, and you see that across all of them. The reason bringing about change is very hard is because there is more resistance to the change than there is willingness for that change. That equation has got to reverse. If we realize as a race and as a country and as a community, that change is the most constant thing. And we've got to constantly keep up with times and not sit on our laurels of yesterday. That is the biggest thinking. That's where the penny has to drop. So that is one thing that is absolutely needed. So I'll do anything and everything in order to do that. I will actually make it easier for companies to make that change. And that kind of bridges to your second question as well, because if there are companies that are trying to do different innovations, I would actually want to make it easier for them, remove their roadblocks, not actually catch them up neither in regulation nor in other kinds of bureaucracy, and not measure them by the same standards. When the cloud companies come to the UK, it's easier for them to do things than for a UK company if we were to either develop our own cloud or to do anything else which is as innovative. It is easier for an American company to come and do that to the UK. So we are okay with somebody from outside disrupts us, but we are not okay when we want to disrupt ourselves. I would do completely the reverse. I would make it more harder for others to disrupt us, and I would make it super easy for us to disrupt ourselves. That way we keep the knowledge in the country, and it's a change from within. And I'd actually, every success story, I'd shout it out from the rooftops, and every unsuccessful story, I would shout out that even louder, because that would show the contrast, saying when you're doing innovation is not just about doing new things. It's about how to bring new thinking into the same problem. And every time you solve that problem, I'll make that a hero. And when innovation is not used, I'd make that a hero as well, saying this is the hero you don't want, this is the hero you want.
Brilliant. Harmeen Mehta, thanks so much for spending time with me.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed that, Ed.